History isn't just a collection of dates, it is a blueprint for the present. Welcome to the Mind of Cy Marie. This is a solo episode where I am going to be discussing the volunteer state blueprint from Pulaski to present. So, in Tennessee, that blueprint was drawn up in 1865 in a law office in Pulaski, Tennessee, where six Confederate veterans sat in a room and designed a movement that would metastasize into the Ku Klux Klan. And this wasn't just a quote unquote social club in the woods. It was the birth of a paramilitary strategy designed by lawyers and judges to dismantle Black political agency before it could ever take root. Pulaski was the epicenter, and it set a tone for Tennessee that has never truly changed. While states like Alabama or Mississippi are often the national scapegoats for Southern racism, Tennessee has always been the brain of the operation. Alabama might be open about it, but Tennessee is the master of the polished pivot. They use the Music City spell and the veneer of the New South progressivism to mask a century-long legislative project of disenfranchisement. Excuse me, legislative project of disenfranchisement. They call it Southern hospitality. I call it white supremacy with a smile. See, Tennessee led the way in codifying hate. In 1881, the volunteer state passed the first separate but equal railroad laws in the nation. This wasn't just a local policy, it provided the legal chassis that the rest of the South used to build the entire Jim Crow system. They pioneered the poll taxes and the understanding clauses, the sophisticated legal maneuvers designed to bypass the 15th Amendment while keeping the state's image intact. This legacy of removal and exclusion runs deep. It is the home of Andrew Jackson, the architect of Manifest Destiny and the Indian Removal Act of 1830. The same mindset that justified the forced removal of indigenous people from Tennessee soil is what justified the removal of Black political influence, which is continuing even today. It is a straight line from Jackson's displacement policies to the current cracking of Memphis. The world noticed what Tennessee was doing. In the 1930s, Nazi lawyers specifically studied the Jim Crow South and Tennessee's legal codes to draft the Nuremberg laws. They were obsessed with how an American state could maintain a global image of quote unquote civilization while legally maintaining a pitiless racial hierarchy. Hitler didn't invent the wheel, he just looked at the Tennessee blueprint and scaled it. Fast forward to May 2026. The tactics have evolved from hoods to high-tech maps. Governor Bill Lee just signed a redistricting plan that surgically guts the representation of Black voters in Memphis. By splitting Shelby County across multiple rural-dominated districts, the state has mathematically ensured that the Black political voice is neutralized. This is Jim Crow 2.0. It doesn't look like a whites-only sign, it looks like a convoluted map. It is the same strategy. Use the law as a scalpel to cut the heart out of democracy. The NAACP has already filed suit against this mid-decade power grab, but we have to recognize the pattern. Tennessee has consistently worked to derail every inch of progress made for fair elections and racial equality. They scapegoat their neighbors while they lead the charge toward regression. We can't change the future until we acknowledge the origin. We must keep a standing record of these complaints. The lines on the map have changed, but the principles of the volunteer state remain exactly the same as they were in that Pulaski office in 1865. So don't let the music distract you from the truth. Make sure that you're staying loud and staying informed. That said, I also want to take a moment to talk about how what's happening here is truly what is continuing in a pattern across the entire South. There's been occurrences in Louisiana and in Alabama, and these things are honestly astonishing and yet sadly very unsurprising considering everything that has been happening ever since this administration took office for the second time. So, you know, this is the song of the South, if you will. It's terrible and it's awful, and if we don't do something about this and we aren't loud and continue to advocate, they are going to continue to whittle away the rights of BIPOC people in every district possible. And what that means for the rest of the nation is very scary, honestly. And this is going to be undoing decades of progress that has been made toward making America a freer place for everyone and where democracy was upheld. But in this situation that we're seeing, um, they're not even they're not even hiding it anymore. They're just being very open about things, and um, it's important, I think, to understand how Manifest Destiny inspired what happened in Germany with the Holocaust and how this is all full circle. Um, it's important for people to understand that while Tennessee has been the place that people considered a progressive southern state and a place where things were more openly accepted, the reality is that's not really the case, especially as it pertains to um, the recent changes to legislation where it pertains to transgender um, persons in the state. And that is something I feel like is very important to emphasize all of this and how it's intersectional. Um, and to understand that what we're witnessing is is truly the repeal of countless individual rights. You know, early this year, Tennessee passed several significant and restrictive laws targeting the transgender community, shifting focus from youth only bans to broader measures affecting adults, healthcare, tracking, and public institutions. And it's this new South quote unquote mask that's not holding up. It's slipping as the state continues to codify these measures into law and to split voting districts where, you know, it's predominantly black voters. They have a new watch list law, HB 0754 and SB 0676, which was signed early 2026 and requires clinics that provide gender affirming care to report detailed data to the state, including the date of treatment, patient age, and sex, specific medications prescribed. And advocates are calling it a government watch list designed to chill access to care for adults. And then TenCare bans effective April 2026. HB 2498 prohibited TenCare, the state's Medicaid program, from covering gender affirming care for individuals of any age. It explicitly bans reimbursement for treatments intended to help someone live as an identity inconsistent with the individual's sex. The youth ban upheld. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled on June 18, 2025 in U.S. versus Scrimeti, upholding Tennessee's ban on gender affirming care for minors. This cemented the 2023 law that prohibits puberty blockers and hormone therapy for those under 18. Then they have the public spaces and institutional restrictions. They have the Riley's Gaines Act, which is HB 0571 SB 0468. That 2026 law mandates that schools, prisons, and shelters recognize only a person's biological sex at birth for gendered spaces. This includes placing transgender women in male prisons and requiring transgender students to use locker rooms corresponding to their birth assigned sex. Redefining sex. State lawmakers have moved to redefine sex across all Tennessee statutes to strictly mean the sex assigned at birth. This allows the state to bypass federal non-discrimination protections by illegally erasing the gender identity from the state's vocabulary. And then there's parental and educational changes from gender expression oversight. In 2026, measures prevent doctors from asking minors about their gender identity without parental consent. Furthermore, it clarifies that raising a child according to their birth assigned sex cannot be classified as child abuse, effectively shielding parents from intervention if a child is struggling with gender dysphoria. And then the conscious laws with the Medical Ethics Defense Act, which went into full effect in 2025, allows medical professionals to deny any care, including gender affirming care, that conflicts with their personal conscience, so they can be prejudiced and discriminate against their patients. The volunteer state pattern, like as you can see here, Tennessee is leading the charge in legalizing all of these setbacks. And by creating a database of transgender patients and stripping funding for adult care, Tennessee is moving toward a total phase out of transgender existence within its borders. And while Alabama gets the headlines for its rhetoric, Tennessee is quietly building the most robust legislative cage in the country. And, this is something that we have to pay attention to, especially as we look at the redistricting of Memphis maps and what that means, all of it together. We have experienced a surgical strike, just like all civil rights advocates are saying. The Tennessee General Assembly moved with unprecedented speed to dismantle the state's last majority black congressional district, which is District 9, effectively neutralizing the political influence of Shelby County. So the breakdown of exactly how this map was redrawn and the legal maneuvers used to pull it off were wild to witness, honestly. The new map takes a geographically compact majority black population of Memphis and carves it into 3 separate districts. The 9th district, once a safe, concentrated seat for Memphis, has been stretched nearly 200 miles eastward, reaching all the way into the Nashville suburbs. This absorbs massive amounts of white, rural, Republican-leaning voters to dilute the Memphis urban core. That's ridiculous. The 5th and 8th districts, large portions of Memphis and Shelby County, have been siphoned off into these 2 neighboring districts, which are dominated by conservative rural counties in West and Middle Tennessee. And this is a stretch of mileage of difference. They're not close by. Like 200 miles is a lot. Then the outcome there means this turns a historical Democratic majority black seat into a notional Republican gain, with the goal of ensuring all of 9 of Tennessee's congressional seats are held by a Republican. And that's ridiculous. So the legal loophole that we can look at here, the state had to clear a major legal hurdle in order to do this mid-decade. By repealing the state law before passing the map, Governor Bill Lee signed legislation on May 7th to repeal a state law that previously prohibited mid-decade redistributing. And that gave the Kalai cover. Tennessee leaders cited the recent U.S. Supreme Court ruling in Louisiana versus Kalai, May 2026, which they interpreted as a green light to prioritize partisan advantage over racial representation. And that is insane and scary, y'all. Republican House Speaker Cameron Sexton explicitly stated that the new districts were drawn based on politics and not racial data. That is not acceptable. There's supposed to be no taxation without representation, and representation is everything, and representation needs to be fair according to what the actual population looks like. There's a reason why these districts were drawn the way that they were. And that's a scary thing for him to say just outright, like not even any concern. So again, brings me back to Jim Crow 2.0. The response on the ground has obviously been intense. We're not going to take this. During the special session, State Representative Charlene Oliver stood on her desk in the Senate chamber, unfurling a banner that read Jim Crow 2.0 and Stop the Tennessee Steal. So then came the NAACP lawsuit, which was filed on May 7th, just hours after the map was signed, and the NAACP Tennessee State Conference filed a lawsuit to block the map. They argue that fracturing the voting power of a majority black city is a direct violation of the Tennessee Constitution. U.S. Representative Steve Cohen, the longtime representative of District 9, filed his own lawsuit, calling the move an anti democratic power grab done at the request of the federal partisan interest to secure a slim House majority. Um, and all of this is important because we need to understand that this modern day set of clauses here from the 1880s, the state used legal jargon to disqualify individual black voters. And here in 2026, they're using geographic jargon to disqualify an entire city. As the first state to strike after the Supreme Court's weakening of the Voting Rights Act, Tennessee is once again acting as the laboratory for the rest of the South, just like they've always done. And when it comes down to it, they're just going to turn their face and act like they're just the good guy while the other Southern states take the rap for doing the dirty work, when, in all honesty, they're the brains of the operation. So, yeah, pay attention to what's happening and look to Nashville, that has been having different protests and lawmakers even locking arms to resist this vote, providing a visceral look at what's happening and how it does look just like those Jim Crow 2.0 allegations that have been delivered. And yeah, this is the crazy kind of stuff that's happening in our country. It's unbelievable, and we cannot allow it.